Tonight on All In.
You have to be a leader. The president has to lead.
Countdown to shutdown.
It always has to be the top. I mean, problems start from the top, and they have to get solved from the top.
Tonight, the last-ditch effort to avoid the crisis President Trump created.
The discussions will continue.
The far-right Republicans standing in the way of a deal.
I hope the president talks some sense into Senator Schumer and the Democrats.
And how much does the blame game really matter?
I really think the pressure is on the president.
And new details from President Trump's porn scandal.
The money is what's important here, not the sex.
New questions about who paid Stormy Daniels. And All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. With 4 hours to go until the federal government runs out of money, we are now barreling towards a government shutdown that is, in a strange way, over the president's border wall. In half an hour, Senate Democrats will meet on Capitol Hill to plan their strategy for a key procedural vote at 10 p.m., a make-or-break measure to advance the GOP's short-term spending bill, which requires 60 votes to pass. At this hour, it is not at all clear Republicans have those votes. Now, the irony here, the thing that you need to keep in mind as you watch all this unfold, is that there are big bipartisan majorities right now in both houses of Congress to pass a bill that takes care of both major sticking points in the Children's Health Insurance Program, which ran out of funding in September, and protected status for Dreamers. But a week ago, the president rejected a bipartisan deal to take care of the Dreamers, blowing up the negotiations. And amid the fallout, Republicans have pitted those two priorities against each other, trying to force Democrats into a painful false choice. The majority leader actually tweeted this out today, being very honest about what they're doing. Democrats have a choice to make. Who do you want to save, Dreamers or sick kids? But before we get to the big vote in a couple hours, it's worth taking a step back to remember how we got to this point. Because the original sin, the fateful choice that sent us down a path to this moment, was a campaign promise made by the president.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. And I'll build them very inexpensively. I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
It was arguably the central theme of Trump's candidacy, the signature proposal of a campaign otherwise light on policy and a rallying cry for his base. Donald Trump would build a wall on the southern border and, as the crowd would cheer, Mexico would pay for it. But once he took office, it became clear, as it has always should have been, that Mexico, of course, had zero intention of paying for Trump's wall. So the president looked to another source of funding, namely you, the American taxpayer. And getting Congress to foot the bill turned out to be harder than it looked, mainly because we don't actually need a wall. Border security is already tough. Because lawmakers who actually represent the border region know that. They don't want a wall. And probably because of that whole Mexico paying for it thing. So the president floated a different tactic to try and get his wall.
Build that wall. Now, the obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
There it is. The threat of a government shutdown to get the wall built. Now, that was not his only ploy, because in September, the Trump administration announced it was taking away Dreamers' protected status under DACA, something they did not have to do, leaving them subject to deportation unless Congress came in and intervened. And it was very clearly a straightforward hostage-taking. And the ransom was also very explicit. Give me my border wall, and the Dreamers don't get kicked out of the country.
We're looking at DACA. We have to get something for it, but we are looking at DACA, and we'll see what happens. I'd love to do a DACA deal, but we have to get something very substantial for it, including the wall, including security.
Last week, the president basically got his ransom, or at least some part of it. A bipartisan group of senators went to the White House with a deal that included a $1.5 billion down payment on his wall. Not provided by the Mexican government, but by the American taxpayer. But instead of taking that deal, the president responded that he doesn't want people from S-hole countries coming to the U.S. And so here we are. Steve Schmidt is MSNBC political analyst and Republican strategist. Jason Johnson, also an MSNBC political analyst and the politics editor for The Root. Steve, do you see this as essentially about that initial wall promise that he's trying to keep?
It's certainly about that, Chris, but it's also about the chaos and the incompetence of the governing majority. both at the executive branch and in the Congress. Once again, we're flirting with a government shutdown. We see a total incompetency around the ministerial functions of governing. If we avert a shutdown, no doubt it will be hailed as some great victory that we've managed to keep government functioning and opening. It's just, I think it's about the wall. It's about a dozen things, but nothing greater than just the total ineptitude of this governing majority.
You know, to Steve's point, Jason, about a deal here, you know, it strikes me there's actually some political upside for the president to make a deal, which is why I think it's a little odd that he has yet to do that, because that's obviously how he ran. And this is what he had to say back in 2013 about the role of the president in the shutdown. Take a listen.
It always has to be the top. I mean, problems start from the top, and they have to get solved from the top, and the president's the leader. And he's got to get everybody in a room, and he's got to lead. You know, the interesting thing is in 25 years and 50 years and 100 years from now, when the government is, you know, they talk about the government shutdown, they're going to be talking about the president of the United States. Who was the president at that time? Mm-hmm. They're not going to be talking who the head of the House was, the head of the Senate, who's running things in Washington. So I really think the pressure is on the president.
You think the same is true here?
Well, it should be, Chris, but again, we've seen all along the incredible elasticity to Donald Trump's support. I mean, the core issue here, we've seen he's a bad business manager. We've seen he's a bad deal. He's not a good hostage taker either, right? I mean, he's screaming, I'm the captain now, and he's telling people what he's going to do, but he can't even control his own party. And until the Republicans actually feel that they can negotiate with the president, as opposed to him saying one thing on Thursday and they say something else on Friday, they can't really, they can't work anything out.
That, you know, Steve, this gets to your point about the incompetence here. A few people have said this, and I think they're right, that if the president actually sent a clear signal in either direction about DACA, I'm committed to a deal and we're going to do it, or I'm not going to give you a deal, those kids are out of luck, those people are out of luck, and you're screwed, that would probably avert the shutdown. It's the fact that no one actually knows what the White House's position that keeps bringing us to points like this.
Including the White House, which doesn't know its position. Right. So the negotiators go up there, and every day it's like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football. They pull the football away, Charlie Brown lines flat up on his back. And so they don't have a fixed position on any of this stuff. They're transacting moment to moment. There's no fixed ideology. There's an absurd slogan from the campaign. That's the one thing that everyone in the country remembers for, is that it was Mexico that was going to pay for the wall, not the American taxpayer. And so now we got two issues. We got a defunded children's health insurance program that hospital executives all over the country are increasingly worried about, is that how are we going to treat sick kids? If you talk to a hospital executive on the one hand, and then we have on the other, we have 90% of the country, 90% of the country believes that the Dreamers should have a protected status, period. And yet, on both of these issues, just as simple as things as you could think to solve, the ineptitude doesn't allow it to be solved. It's amazing to watch.
That's the crazy thing, Jason, to Steve's point, is the two contentious issues here, which is chip funding and protection for the Dreamers, there's both bipartisan majorities in both houses to take care of them, A. B, they're not, you know, 50-50 issues. This is not abortion. This is not something having to do with Israel and the occupied territories. These are fairly easy gimmies politically that you could solve if you wanted to.
Right. Who doesn't like a bunch of college kids who wants to stay in America, and who doesn't want to feed children? Like, what kind of horrible party do you want to look at? But this is where it gets back to being President Trump's fault. Because, look, when he made his excrement hole comments last week, what it showed the Democrats was like, okay, you know what? We don't know if we can negotiate with this guy in good faith, because his core issue is he doesn't want these people here. And then when he lied about what he said, it makes it even more difficult for people to cut deals, because all of this could be solved. And remember, we don't just have a situation where we're running out of funding for the government. We've also got the debt ceiling coming up in March. We've got DACA coming up in March. They need to get some of these things fixed now, or this shutdown could be much worse than anyone anticipated.